Earth.
Fire.
Air.
Water.
Long ago. This is not Avatar.
I was gonna say, you really threw me off because the original show starts with water, earth, fire, air, and you went with Korra order, so I really had to think about what the order of the elements was.
Welcome. This is Research Rank Repeat. This is co-host Hannah.
This is co-host Alyssa, and yes, Hannah's correct, although we have covered Avatar-related things on this show. Today, it's not Avatar. We saw a movie.
It's Pixar. Pixar. It's Elemental.
Yes, the newest feature film from Pixar is finally out. Came out this weekend, and Hannah and I hit the theaters again. Update to our Pixar lists, as we have not seen a Pixar film since last summer.
Yes.
Which, unfortunately, wasn't exactly a hit.
No. It was, not very light.
Year.
It was Lightyear. Fortunately, it was not the best movie. Not the worst, but...
Yeah.
You know,
it was fine.
I was excited to get back into Pixar.
Me too, because it's been a while.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the trailer for this movie, and I had a lot of thoughts. Mm-hmm. But I didn't really look at much going into, like, critical response and things like that before we watched it, just because I like to go in with an open mind. Mind, yes. He lost his mind.
Yeah.
Hamlet. But yeah, anyway, so we'll just go right into it. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to do a similar thing to what we did with Fast X, where I'm going to go back and cover the previous film, Lightyear, since we also saw it shortly into its release, so we can go back and look at a full update on what actually happened with that film. Overall, the film grossed $226.4 million on a $200 million budget, which was a box office bomb.
Yes.
Lost an estimated $106 million for the company.
Yeah, especially for Pixar.
Yeah. There's some reasons for why people think that this happened. First of all, the film did get generally positive reviews, but it had some criticism for the screenplay. Some of the reasons why people thought it might have failed in the box office is that it was competing with both Top Gun Maverick, which made billions of dollars. I think it made over $1 billion. And Jurassic World. People think there also might have been some brand confusion from the marketing of this film, the fact that it was a spin-off of the Toy Story series, the fact that most people were at this point still using Disney Plus to watch films, because all the Pixar films released from onward to Lightyear were exclusively through Disney Plus. There's also the fact that Tim Allen didn't voice Buzz Lightyear, which some people were apparently very upset about. I don't really care. And also, there was some light, backlash from the conservatives over being a same-sex couple kissing scene.
Yes.
Because, sexualizing those children.
Those drag
during
queens.
Pride Month.
Those drag queens.
Yeah, during Pride Month. However badly it did in the box office, Lightyear was the most watched movie on Disney Plus in the month of August of 2022, and it was the #1 movie on the site for 35 days straight, which is pretty good, all things considered. So even though it didn't perform well in the box office, it still performed well on their streaming service, which I think all of the previous Pixar films released on the streaming service all performed very well. Last we had heard, I believe, when I listened to the episode that we had released on Lightyear, was sitting at like a 52% on Rotten Tomatoes. It was like the lowest scored Pixar film. I can say that it has increased. It currently sits at a 74% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is, although still the lowest rated film in the Toy Story franchise of Pixar, it's much higher than what it originally was. Metacritic is a 60 out of 100 and a cinema score of A-. In May of this year, Pixar had some layoffs. They laid off 75 people from Pixar, including some high-profile people. The director of Lightyear, Angus McClare, was one of the people laid off, as well as producer Galen Sussman, who was the woman who saved Pixar 2.
Toy Story 2.
Oh. who saved Toy Story 2 in 1999, and she actually has been with the company since 1995, since the original Toy Story was released.
Yeah, Twitter went ballistic about that, which I agree, not right to lay off someone who saved a movie for your company.
Because this is not necessarily Pixar, but Disney-wide layoffs, and Pixar happened to have 75 people laid off. Although I don't know if Pixar was hit harder because of how poorly Lightyear did. Right. In terms of, like, budget, in terms of profit, it did not profit. But yeah, so that's just a little bit of background on Lightyear. Mm-hmm. And now we can head into the background of Elemental. Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to say something.
Sure.
While we're talking. It has been announced there's a Toy Story 5 coming out.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so on the docket, we have Toy Story 5, which, again, we've talked about this so many times. We do not need a Pixar 5. But again, if they're hurting for money, Toy Story makes bank.
Yes.
The main series. It has that familiarity. And they also are creating an Inside Out 2.
Yep, next year.
Which I am intrigued about, because the first Inside Out is, I think, my number 2 movie. I think I ranked it second.
We both had our top 5.
Yeah, one of my favorite Pixar films. Gut punch. So I'm intrigued, but I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yes. Okay.
And in a new original film, which we saw a trailer for.
Yes.
That will be 2 films in 2024.
Yes.
Elio, I think is what it is.
Yes, that will be the next movie we will cover.
Yes. Elemental. Elemental is the 27th feature-length film released by Pixar. It was released on June 16th of 2023. Runtime of 109 minutes. It was directed by Peter Sohn, who was the director of The Good Dinosaur.
Okay.
He's also worked and I think written for a few other things. And it was scored by Thomas Newman, who has worked primarily with Andrew Stanton films. So he did the scores for Finding Nemo, Finding Dory, and WALL-E. I think has a rating of PG, but I actually didn't write that down.
It is PG.
Okay, it is PG. Peter Sohn, the director, has said that the story of this film is heavily inspired from his youth as a son of immigrants in New York City in the 1970s, and that the story itself was inspired by a lot of romantic films, such as Moonstruck and Amelie. I don't know if you've seen either of those films.
I've seen Amelie.
So Moonstruck, it's funny because that one has actually been recommended to me recently, and I have it on my Letterboxd watch list. Yes. It has Cher in it.
Yes.
It's supposed to be very good. So
find us on Letterboxd.
Yeah, find us on Letterboxd. We will add this to our list.
Oh, we have to do our Fast X ranking.
We also need to add that as well. We'll do that. So the production of this film actually took 7 years, which is a long time. He apparently had pitched this after The Good Dinosaur was released, and I think that was 2013, maybe 2012, somewhere around there. It's Pride Month. I read a comment on the Wikipedia for this movie that one of the characters, Lake Ripple, who is one of Wade's younger siblings, is said to be Pixar's first non-binary character. Which is... I'm not a member of the LGBTQ community, so I can't necessarily speak on whether or not I think that is good representation. However, I feel like, again, this is it feels kind of performative, where it's like, I wouldn't have known that watching the film. There was no indication of that. In a way, like, they could cut it from China and other countries that would take issue with, like, for instance, with Lightyear, where countries took issue with a same-sex couple kissing. You know, it's kind of hard to say, like, I was reading it, and I'm like, oh, well, that's nice, but also... It's not like you wouldn't watch that movie and know that character is non-binary.
Right. I feel like it's one of those things where it's like, it's nice that they're doing it, but it's like, we've been hearing a lot about, like, Target and, like, why companies they're basically using Pride Month as a way to market and to make money, which, you know, I guess representation is representation, but at the same time, if you're just going to throw a random character in that has no relevance and that it's not really clear, I feel like it's not really doing much. It'd be cool to see, like, a main character.
Right.
Like, someone, you know, that's in the whole movie and not just, like, a side character. So, yeah, I guess that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think they also maybe had one speaking line.
Right.
And maybe appeared in 2 minutes of the film.
Yeah.
If that. So, Hannah, you might like this. In terms of the marketing. Now, there is heavy discussion about the marketing of this film, and I have comments about that from my own perspective, but the characters of Wade and Ember were promoted on the show American Idol, seen cheering in the audience when this year's winner was crowned, followed by a sneak peek of like a trailer of the film following the show's finale, which I think is such a weird marketing play to do.
Yeah, that is strange.
All right, some negative things, Hannah. So far, as this film has just released, it has a worldwide gross of $48.5 million, which is the worst opening weekend of any Pixar film ever.
Yeah.
Of the 27 films, it's the worst. Even worse than Onward.
Yeah.
Which released basically as the world shut down.
Yeah.
Ooh, which is rough.
Yeah.
It premiered alongside The Flash, which is a major blockbuster superhero film, as well as competition from Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which is also an animated film that released, I think, last week was its opening premiere. And that movie is making tons of money, like hundreds of millions of dollars already.
The Flash also kind of bombed, too. So.
It's also bombing, too. I mean, I understand why that one's bombing.
Well, yes. Circumstances, but yes.
So, yeah, some of the things cited as potentially being issues with the premiere, the gross so far, is poor marketing, and again, audiences being used to Disney Plus releases of the film shortly after it comes out, and families not wanting to make the travel to a theater to spend that much money when you could spend, like $8 a month or whatever, and then watch the movie with your family and not have to spend like $100 to go to a theater. So currently it sits at a 76% on Rotten Tomatoes, a Metacritic score of 59 of 100, and a Cinema score of A. I selected a quote from a reviewer. Jordan Mitzer from The Hollywood Reporter was quoted as saying, "The elements all fit perfectly into place, so much so that the creative flames were doused." What critics think of it. There is a lot of positive praise. There's a lot of positive praise for the animation. However, there is some contention about the story being seen as underwhelming. And a lot of that, what I've seen, is that a lot of current Disney and Pixar films focus heavily on generational trauma. Mm-hmm. It's a very recurring theme. And I think what a lot of the takeaway from a lot of people reviewing this film and discussion into that of the story being seen as underwhelming is that it's seen as not as impactful as something like Turning Red, where it's kind of a similar, like, general story, but hits more impactfully, or something like Encanto, which is not Pixar, but is Disney, and that also tends to hit a little harder. So, just to give a little background on that. And now I have the summary that we have from the Disney website. Disney and Pixar's Elemental is an all-new original feature film set in Element City, where fire, water, land, and air residents live together. The story introduces Ember, a tough, quick-witted, and fiery young woman whose friendship with a fun, sappy, go-with-the-flow guy named Wade challenges her beliefs about the world they live in.
Yeah, I want to touch on something really quick.
Sure.
About the box office, etc. The marketing was horrible for this movie.
Terrible marketing.
I don't remember seeing, like, much about this.
So that was one of my things I wrote down right after we got to the theater, is that this film had some of the worst marketing I've seen. So I remember watching the trailer for this movie, and they framed it as, like, a Romeo and Juliet, like, forbidden love was, like, the main plot. This main character of Ember doesn't want to run the family business. She doesn't want to do that. And it's like, what if I don't want to be like you, Dad, the Troy Bolton,
Right.
We can't be together. And, well, that's, like, an element of it. That's not the main plot.
No.
Like, the trailer they released doesn't really present the story and how it actually plays out, or like what I think the story is more focused on.
Right. And that's not to say the trailer means everything, because Lightyear... Oh, I was going to say something because I couldn't... The voices... The main voice... What's the main girl's name?
Oh, it's...
Ember.
Ember, yeah.
Ember. She is Ellie from The Half of It, which is where I recognized her from.
Okay.
Her voice sounded really familiar, so I looked her up. But anyways...
She apparently was chosen for the role based off that her role in the half
cool.
of it.
That's
I read that.
Anyways, I feel like it was funny. I definitely laughed a couple times.
Yeah.
I think it was interesting. The animation is amazing, as Pixar movies tend to be. I think that it was actually interesting to do sort of like an immigration / like almost xenophobia, racism sort of not undertones, but sort of like wrapped in that.
Yeah.
And I do think that like adding this elements, like the different elements, created for an interesting story. I felt like, as opposed to Lightyear, I didn't get like really bored in the middle. It felt like the story was like moving along at a good pace. I felt like there was a good amount of, I don't know, I thought overall the story was actually pretty solid. I didn't have a big complaint with the story like some of the critics kind of had said. I just think that it flowed pretty well. I mean, yeah, at times it's a little bit like we've seen this before. But for some reason I was so charmed by Wade and Ember's like storyline. Like they just worked well together, not even as just like romantic interest, but just as like two people. That I found that interesting too. So like overall I would say I was like happily impressed with it.
I think that some elements of this film do work really well. And I was reading someone's review, or like a few quotes from a review, that this is, I think, probably Pixar's first like romantically focused film.
Yeah.
Where like the main plot was a romance. So I think that worked really well. I think the romance aspects were well done. I thought the animation was good. I liked the way that the different elements looked. Like I liked the way the fire looked. I liked when Ember like getting like when she got upset and angry, she would like turn purple. Or like there's one point where she's really sad and she gets like really faded and like flicker. I liked that the way they built the world. It felt a lot like Zootopia, where there's kind of this like these different environments and the way the world is set up. It feels a lot like Zootopia. The humor, I do think, worked pretty well. There were a lot of scenes I think worked. And I liked a lot of the characterizations. The one thing I will say is I think the ending was a bit rushed.
Yeah.
Especially in this aspect of this generational trauma. I think this, like, the climax of the film was not as strong as it could have been because of, I think of something like Encanto. I think of how much I cried watching that movie, and that I've seen that movie, I don't know, maybe 5 times now, and I've cried every time. You get the Mariposas, the Butterfly song, where you see their, like, background of, like, her husband dying, and how she, like, was so stubborn in that, the legacy and the family name and all of that, and how much time was put into that. And then I look at this, and it's like, we get a scene with, you know, her father finding out about her romance with this water guy, and also the fact that, like, the damages with the pipes, like, basically water is coming into their fire shop, and he gets mad, and he's like, I'm not giving you the shop, I'm not retiring, like, I can't trust you. There's this big flood, and she, like, has to save Flame, this, like, sacred flame, and is like, I'm a bad, you know, daughter, I let you down, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, you are my greatest gift. And that scene lasts maybe a minute.
Yeah.
And while it was emotional, I did cry. This movie got me. I did shed a few tears. I can't help but feel that it could have been a lot stronger.
I look at that from a perspective of Pixar. Not that it's necessarily marketed towards kids, but it's animated films. And I tend to look at that as sometimes it has to be a simpler solution in order for it to make sense in a kid's film. And I feel like the scene leading up to that, where she is trying to go back into the home, there's this moment where, like, he's like, I have to go back and get the flame, and she goes for him, and that's, like, the moment where I felt like it clicked for him, like, that all that stuff didn't matter, and that's why he said, like, oh, you're my greatest treasure, blah, 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 you're my greatest work. So that's kind of how I saw it in that way, and I was okay with the ending. Would I have liked a little bit longer? Sure. But I feel like a lot of kids' movies tend to do that, where they rush the ending, or they maybe don't put as much energy into, like, finding solutions in that way. But I can see where you're coming from.
I just like to counterpoint and say Coco.
Yeah.
The end... I guess that's the thing, is, like, if we're talking about, like, Pixar as a company being known for these, like, mature way of telling children's stories, like Inside Out. and Coco, and even things like Soul, or like even like Luca, I feel like did a lot of stuff with that I think I don't know, do I have too high of standards?
Well,
maybe.
Luca's ending, I felt rushed too.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, if this kind of feels similar to Luca, like in terms of like the story and the way that the story is writ, but just like I don't know, maybe I have too high of expectations for Pixar. The other thing I wanted to note is that I feel like Pixar might struggle with the new animation market. Because something that has become a lot more common, and it's been interesting, I wanted to bring this up, but I guess this is probably a good time, is that there's been a kind of a shift in the animation market, where like Disney and Pixar are not leading. You have things like DreamWorks with Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and you have Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and the sequel, like those two films, being produced with this really incredibly, and I know you haven't seen either of those films, incredibly creative animation. Very well done, like it's like a 2D, 3D blend of animation that looks really clean. It looks really well done. Just more creative choices. And I think that I worry that Pixar is going to become stagnant. Yeah. And that they've created this kind of characteristic of all the people kind of have the same look.
Right.
And this new movie that's coming out, Elio, also has that same look for these humans, where it's like, I feel like they're limited in what their films look like.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like you get, when you're a company like that and you establish something, you kind of stick with it. But yeah, it would be nice to see them take more chances and do things a bit more creatively.
It's just because, like, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish came out last year, and I think it made like $600 million. And Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man movie that just came out, is also in the hundreds of millions already. Right. And the first one also, it won the Best Animated Feature Film of the year it came out, and that movie's fantastic. I haven't seen the new one yet, but those movies are animated movies. Even like things like Minions are making tons of money. I didn't see it, and it did not review well. Journey to something.
I don't even know. The fact that I don't even know that
it's Jake Gyllenhaal's in it. It's also a movie about generational trauma.
Okay.
Strange World. Yeah. So the movie Strange World, it came out, I think, a few months ago. I just think they're struggling, and I hope they can find a way to get some creative spark, to get something different that resonates with people.
I think not only that, but I think Disney as a brand is not fared well under public scrutiny, opinion.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so I think that kind of stuff probably does hurt it too, as well as with like streaming and everything else we mentioned. But yeah, I think Disney has not been used to in the past having competition.
Right. Or at least not more recently. Right. Like they had they definitely suffered in the early 2000s. They were not doing well, which is why they bought Pixar, because they were struggling so much with their animated, and Pixar was flourishing. But I'm glad other companies, like, if you would have told me DreamWorks would have had my favorite animated film of last year, I probably wouldn't have thought that. Like, Sony's doing stuff. There's, like, also smaller companies that are doing, like, Guillermo del Toro's doing animated films. And I'm glad other companies are getting money and chances to tell stories like that are creative and different and animated, in fun ways that resonate with people. But just as a whole, just in a general sense about Pixar, I'm curious about how that will continue in the future. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I did really like the soundtrack of this film.
Yeah, it was cool.
I thought it was relatively different from a lot of other Pixar films, because I feel like Pixar relies really heavily on piano, and especially this composer, because he did WALL-E and he did Finding Nemo, which I think are honestly some of the best scored Pixar movies. It felt very unique and like very captivating, and worked with this story. So I wanted to commend the soundtrack as well, because I really like the soundtrack.
Definitely.
But do you have any other thoughts?
No. Okay. My favorite character, I went with Wade, actually.
I also went with Wade as well.
I think Ember was a strong character, but I think Wade just, like, the fact that he was so
endearing?
No. I mean, he was endearing.
Interesting,
but also the fact that he was so, like, rooting for Ember and wanting her to go after what she wanted in life.
Yeah.
And I think it was nice, too, that, like, he was, like, emotional. Because I feel like, I mean, it's changed.
Sensitive, yeah.
Yeah, he was, you know, sensitive, and he wasn't afraid to show who he was. And he was just, like, even when she, like, rejected him and was like, I don't love you, he still came back for her at the end.
Right.
And so I think that he was just, like, a nice character. And he was very, like, charming, too. Like,
yeah.
I just couldn't help but like him.
I thought he was also very earnest as well. I also did like Ember quite a bit, but I felt like Wade was a very interesting character in that I don't feel like... I don't want to use the word, like, like masculinity, but, like, male representation in general. I feel like he's kind of... It's nice to see other types of tropes, I guess, you know, because he is very, like, in touch with his feelings. I like that part of his characterization is this fact that his father died, and him and his father didn't get along, and he feels this, like, loss of not being able to change that before his father's death, or, like, be able to live with, like, things he wanted to do and what he wanted to do with his life. So I like that he's able to help Ember with challenging her, like, beliefs and her feelings on things. So
yeah,
I liked that a lot.
My favorite line, I believe it was kind of the way it was delivered. Wade just goes, "We touched," and everyone just, like, gasped.
Yeah.
It was just the way he said it. I enjoyed.
When I was looking online because I had, like, an idea of what I wanted my line to be, but then I came across another line that I thought was really funny. Is there's this part where Wade's has a one-way ticket to anywhere, and he's saying goodbye to his family, and they're all crying, and his uncle's like, "I made you a painting. It's a lonely man,"
and it's just him,
and it's just a picture of him. And I thought that was really funny. The way it was delivered, it was pretty funny, and I liked that one quite a bit.
My favorite scene is the scene where Ember gets to go in that air bubble and go underwater.
Yeah, I picked that one as well.
Pixar does a really good job of showing, not telling.
Yeah.
There are scenes where they don't have any, like, talking, and it's just, like, music or just, like, visually seeing what's happening. They're able to express characters' emotions and feelings so well in those moments. And so I just found it really interesting, and I just, like, really liked that moment that he did something special for her, and that she finally got to see, like, something that she had wanted to see for so long.
Yeah, it was funny because the other scene I thought about picking, I also picked the one of her being underwater to see the flowers that she couldn't see because of the racism of her fire not being allowed in the building because it's a burning, you know, hazard to this garden. The scene after that where they, like, touch and, like, dance a little bit, like, also is another scene where there's very little dialogue and a lot of just, like, kind of very emotional. But I ended up going with the underwater one because I thought the visual and, like, the storytelling, again, of, like, they still excel at that, like, being able to show you and convey emotion and feeling without having to say that.
Yeah.
It's still very good.
It's interesting because Pixar will do these movies and I'll be like, oh, it's not that great. And then I'll get one of those scenes and I'm like, oh, like, it just gets me.
Well, Pixar gets me to cry, then, you know, it's like, it's always going to be a good film. And they got me. They did get me. Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of ranking, right now I would put it at number 10.
Okay.
So that still keeps Cars 3 at number 9 and Luca at number 11. The reason I put it above Luca is just because I felt like the story felt a little bit stronger and the characters, like the side characters, felt a little bit stronger. And I thought it was, like, funny. It was more moments that made me laugh, I feel like. So I think Cars 3 has this hold on me that I cannot.
Cars
for some
3
reason,
is a weird one.
Yeah, it is weird. But I think Cars 3 altogether is still, like, a better put together movie. So I'd put it at 10.
Okay, so I have mine at number 13. So I kind of went similar, where when I was trying to think, I'm like, what movie do I feel like general sense is closest to this? And I also thought Luca as well. I was like, I feel a similar thing to Luca, where I feel positively about it, but I don't think it is, like, a favorite. So that ended up being between Luca as number 12 and then Monsters, Inc. as number 14. And I think it's, like, which is, you know, on the top half of the films, is there's now 27. And I feel like for now that's the place that it should go. Because I liked Turning Red more than this film.
Yeah.
I thought that was more impactful to me in terms of story and stuff than this one was. As always, Cars 2 is still number 27, last of both our lists. And also, because Hannah and I have talked about this, and I know we've mentioned this probably the last time we recorded, but I do want to go and rewatch all of the films that have come out since we started this.
Yes.
Because I've only seen those once, and I feel like maybe my opinions could change on a few of them. If I remember to do that before our next year's film, whenever that comes out in 2024, we'll update you if we change anything in our list. But so far, nothing has changed on my list. So
same with me.
Yeah, I will say, one thing I have thought about, because this was such a hard choice, is I've thought about switching Ratatouille and Inside Out. Making Ratatouille 2 and Inside Out number 3. But it's like they're neck and neck. They're basically the same number. Those films are both very close together in terms of impact on me. Yeah.
All right.
So that's Elemental.
We will be back next year with Pixar. I believe March is when the Elio comes out.
That sounds right.
We have our Instagram and our Twitter, R3 Podcasts, email, r3podcasts@gmail.com.
We're also on Letterboxd.
Yeah.
Feel free to let us know if you've seen the film, if you have thoughts about it. Again, we're also looking for anyone. If anyone out there is their favorite film is Pixar as Cars 2, please let us know. We'd love to talk to you, get your opinions, your feelings on that, because we have so many questions.
And concerns.
Concerns. I actually wrote a comment on Letterboxd on Cars 2 that said, if this is your favorite Pixar film, please let us know at r3podcast@gmail.com, because we're trying to spread the word. We just want to know. If anyone's out there, we want to know. But we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
We would like to thank Joseph McDade for our intro music. He provides free music available for all kinds of creative use. The song that we used is called Sunrise Expedition, and you can find it and his other music on his website, josephmcdade.com. If you would like to reach us, you can email us at r3podcasts@gmail.com. That's R, the number 3, podcasts@gmail.com. Or you can find us on Instagram by searching Research Rank Repeat.
Cat hair in my mouth. Poo. Poo poo. Pew pew pew. Oh, you started recording. Uh-oh.